Hello, my name is Chuck Hopkins. I'm at York University where I hold a UNESCO chair on reorienting teacher education to address sustainable development. I do a fair bit of public speaking, traveling to meet with ministries of education or teacher workshops or even government officials, etc. One of the things I get asked pretty much all the time is, what is education for sustainable development? And so in these next few moments, what I want to do is to deal with that issue, to deal with it in three components. The first one, what? Second, so what? And then the third is, what now? So let's talk about the what is it? And of course, you can't begin talking about education for sustainable development without spending a few moments on what is sustainable development itself. Now, this came from the observation that the world is changing. Now, it has always been changing, of course. But what is so important is the speed at which it's changing. We take pride in thinking that we're the only well, realistically, I guess the only animal that has this, we think, at any rate, this great sense of the past. And with science, we're able to look back, well, actually millions of years, and a sense of being able to use tools such as mathematics and reasoning and common sense, etc., to project into the future. And what we've noticed is the speed of the change. Now, in these next few slides, I want to show you some work that has been done at the International Geosphere-Biosphere program in Sweden. There are just 24 charts. They all go from 1750 to roughly the year 2000. And you will notice that the 24 are all very different things. There's paper consumption, the building of dams, etc. And in around 1945, right after the Second World War, you will see a tremendous increase, exponential growth in all of these. And this is what we're noticing. Now, part of that, of course, is because of population growth. In this next slide, you will see that population moves along over the centuries at a fairly low speed, and then suddenly, again, it really takes off. Now, in my lifetime, we've gone from 2 billion to 6 billion, really. We were really concerned about that about, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago. It's still an issue, but we can see that there is an end in sight in that. You see, as countries develop and there is no great need for children, as we moved into a more urban setting, etc., population is dropping. The rate of growth is coming down. There's only a handful of countries that still have very high birth rates. And so we can see that probably we'll peak at between 9 and 10 billion people. The real issue, of course, is the impact of these people. Because in the same time, when we moved from roughly 1 billion to 6 billion, the world's gross domestic product, or GDP, rose from 1 trillion to 70 trillion. I mean, this is the part, and the compounding part is that we don't see an end in sight to that. So what does this mean? Well, it's about the impact on the planet. It's not only will we have more people, but each person is going to have a much greater impact on the planet. So when we looked at that, we noticed this in the 70s, 1970s, 1980s, and in our minds it was mainly, how do we address that in terms of the environment, the environmental impact? And we tried to work on that in isolation. It really didn't work because, you see, there's also a social component and there's an economic component to all of this. The collapse of the fisheries, for instance, is that an environmental problem? Yes, it certainly is an environmental problem, but it's also a social problem for the fishers. and it's also an economic component. So what we tried to do in the late 80s, early 90s, is there was great discussions around the world, and we came up with the concept that yes, we needed development for the billions of people who were living in abject poverty, but there should be a certain kind of development. It shouldn't just be ravaging development. It had to be development that was sustainable over a long period of time. Now, you have the various definitions and so on, but I think the simplest one, it came from an elder in Africa, and it's simply this: enough for all, forever. The discussions you can have around what is enough? What is enough? And for all, is that limited to humans? Is it limited to animals? You know, fantastic philosophical discussions there as well, and then the term forever. Now, so what? So what does this have to do with educators? Well, let's imagine the world that our students are going to be living in. They're going to have to provide for roughly 50% more people, provide reasonably adequately for them as the population moves from the 6 to 9 or 10 billion. They're going to have to do that using less arable land, less fresh water. We're already mining prehistoric water. We're not living on rainfall and so on. They're going to have to quadruple the world's energy supply by 2050. And oh, by the way, that new energy has to be carbon-free. They're going to have to prepare to meet climate change. There are a number of other major issues. So then we stop and say, if this is the world that we are leaving for them, this is the world they're going to inherit, as educators, how well are we preparing them for it? And suddenly, you see, there is a huge issue that begins to arise for us. Are we preparing them for this kind of a world? And all the social issues that will be coming with it as we get huge populations beginning to move either for economic reasons or because of climate or because of other environmental issues. How are we going to deal with these things? How can we even prepare our students to care about these issues? Instead of thinking of themselves as a person, or necessarily as I, or we as a family, we as a community, we as Canadians, we as humans on the planet. This is a question that I think is going to strike at the heart of education over these next few years. UNESCO, it was 1996 when the report was released. What is the purpose of education? And the answer came back from the Delors Commission. It had several components, 4 big ones. One was to know. That is, there are some things that people do need to know. The second is to do. There are some talents and skills and things we need to be able to do. Thirdly, it's to become all that one can. And the fourth one was to live together, to learn to live together. Now, what we're thinking about now is changing that fourth one and expanding it to learn to live together with others sustainably. And that whole concept of others is extremely important as societies begin to mix, mingle, clash, worldviews, thoughts, religions, and so on. This will be extremely important. So that question of what should our students know, be able to do, and value enough to actually take action. That is at the heart of an awful lot of the questions that are in front of us today as educators.